You're okay, it's logged, Alec.
Oh, I saw that. Thank you.
Everybody's hard drive's going.
Oh, I love it. I love it. No, you're all more than welcome, and we will try the new spirit, because it's hugely important for me to see that new spirit, because of course it's at the heart of every bottle, and Trevor and his team do a great job of keeping that consistency. So we'll get some of that to try. Sorry, Trevor, back to you. I have no more questions.
So it's like drop of water in it, and just a wee sip. It's a rich and compact on a palate. You get the lemon zest, and there's a slight spicy note comes through. That's off the sherry cask, the spicy note. And the finish is so long, silky, rich, and very, very sweet. Absolutely great all round. Dram the 16-year-old. Beautiful.
I love it.
And I said before, the old 15-year-old was one of my old favourites as well. Very nice drama. Still got one bottle of it here, unopened.
Any difference, Trevor? Would you describe any particular, see a question there from Dom asking any particular difference between that and the new 16-year-old? I like it, Dom, yep.
The new 16, I find a lot smoother and richer. The sherry comes through more than the 16, I think. It's my personal view.
Is that a 5-year-old you've got there as well, Dom? Yeah, nice. Nice. Could you bring that with you when you come to Strathyla, please? Perfect. Okay, folks.
That's actually matured in a Glenmorangie cask as well, Alex. Dom and I have got that same bottle. So I'll bring it up too. But
oh, really?
It's quite strange to have seen it matured. It's an 80 bottle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's closed. I just bought it because I think we were talking about new spirit and distillery character. So I thought it's good to have a young whiskey to get as close as possible to the new spirit.
Yeah.
How many bottles you want, Alex?
Just keep them coming until you hear otherwise. Yeah, listen, that's a really good point, and I would always try that, get as close to the spirit as possible, and then see how it progresses from there on in. And that's exactly what, of course, what Trevor and his team are doing at the distillery. Listen, Trevor, thanks for that tasting. Great to do a tasting in the presence of the master himself. We'll come back to you in a moment, and we'll ask a few questions, but I'd like to hear more about the distillery character. For the moment, I'd like to hand over to Chris, who, listen, did a brilliant job in rehearsals. So good luck, Chris.
We haven't. This is the rehearsal.
Chris is going to take you through a bit of the history of the company, the history of Longmorn. So any questions at all, please just type them in, or please feel free to jump in and ask. So Chris, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. You can hear me okay. You can see in the background, I'm out in the field with Longmorn Distillery behind me. Not quite. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to show you a few slides. Alex, you can just jump in anytime you want. Some of you, I'm sure you know a lot about the history of Longmorn, but I'm hoping to show you some kind of what I think are quite unique records for this distillery. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, can you see it okay? Alex, okay. Yeah. So this is obviously Longmorn Distillery, which we're going to talk about today. A beautiful distillery near Elgin, about 3 miles south of Elgin, in between Inverness and Aberdeen. It's one of the few distilleries that actually are named after a saint. Most of their distilleries are named after locations like Glenlivet or Glenfiddich or Glenmorangie. They're normally named after the location of where they are. This Longmorn Distillery is actually named after a saint, maybe why it's such great whiskey, but it was actually named after a missionary who brought Christianity to Scots in the area in 625 AD, and it was called St. Martin. And when he died, there was a festival, and it was quite well known, and there was a small church built about 3 miles outside of Elgin. It was dedicated to the saint, and it was known as Longmorn, the Church of St. Marnock. So over the years, it just basically evolved and turned into and became Longmorn. So Longmorn comes from Saint Monarch. It's actually named after a saint. This is an old picture. You can see probably shortly after it was constructed. This is the person, John Duff, who created the distillery. Trevor was mentioning him. He's probably he's actually one of the greatest personalities of the Victorian whiskey industry, but he's not that well known. As Trevor said, he was born in the area and he worked as a manager at Glendronach Distillery for many years. He then took himself and he built another distillery nearby in 1876. He built Glenlossie Distillery near Elgin. And then in 1888, he actually decided to leave the country. He wanted to set up distilling in other countries. He went to Cape Town, where he tried to work with the government to create a distillery, but they weren't too fond of his efforts, so he failed. Then he packed up his family and he went off to the USA, and again trying to open a distillery in the US, and he had unsuccessful. So he returned back to Scotland in 1892, and then he realized the whiskey boom was on. So what he did is he managed the Bonaccord Distillery in Aberdeen. He knew there was a boom in the whiskey market, and he built Longmorn, started building Longmorn in 1893. So he had lots of experience in the distilling industry. He was a hotelier as well, so he was a good businessman. He was a good distiller, a good engineer. So he's really probably a really not as well-known figure as he's very good history to him, but he's not as well known as a lot of the other whiskey barons. This is, believe it or not, this is the drawing by Charles Doig. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but down on the bottom you see Charles Doig, architect Elgin. He's a famous architect that built several distilleries. This is the drawing of the kiln head for 1894, and this is the actual original drawing that we have in the archive. We have the original drawings on the layout of the distillery, and I thought you'd be interested in the kiln to show that the detail and the work that went into creating the drawings when they built the distillery. This here is, we know, as Trevor said, it started in 1894. This is the very first spirit run on Longmorn Distillery. So we know, I don't know if you can read this very well, but on December 4th, 1894, you can see they started making whiskey, and this describes the amount of malt they used and the proof gallons they got on. So we had these records for Longmorn right from the very first spirit run in December 4th, 1894. So when we say established 1894, we're referring to Longmorn Distillery actually producing whiskey in 1894. So it's really good records going right back to the start. This represents the very first whiskey production at the distillery. A week later, this is the 11th day of December, 1894. You see on the left, this is the first cask they started to fill. This is the first order they had for 7 casks. It was the first filling that they did at the distillery. And then what we see a few days later is actually Chivas Brothers starting to buy whiskey from Longmorn Distillery. You see they bought cask number 57 on December 29th. So Chivas Brothers was very quickly was a customer of Longmorn Distillery, or a buyer of Longmorn Distillery whiskey, and they would have used that in their blended whiskeys. It's even today, it's a really important blend for Chivas Regal and our blended whiskey. So Chivas was in there really early, buying some of the very first casks of Longmorn that was produced at the distillery. This is just some other drawings. It started off with 2 stills and very quickly went to 4 stills. Down on the bottom here, you can actually see the still locations. And this again is Charles Doig drawing that he did when they added the 2 new stills. So it gives you a very detail of what the distillery looked like, ground floor and upper floor, and it showed the washbacks and the distilleries, the stills, worm tubs, and so on. So it's quite some really good drawings that we have of the distillery. Now we do know that it became very popular very quickly. According to the National Guardian, it says it jumped into favor with buyers from the earliest day of which it was offered. And this is an article that was written in the National Guardian. It basically says that the fine water for distilling found here had no doubt making it some of the most remarkable whiskey in the area, and it's comparing it to long-established distilleries that has only been operating for a year or two, but already is having a really good reputation. And so right from the very start, it was jumped on. But the blenders wanted it, Chivas Brothers wanted it, and the malt whiskey coming from Longmorn was seen to be a very good blending whiskey. These are just some pictures we have in the archive. Top left, probably around the 1900s, showing distillery workers. We see the little steam train. This looks like barley, that would have been sacks of barley taken into the distillery. And over on the right here, they are the loading casks onto a lorry. So we have several old photographs of the distillery and the workers in the distillery. This one's around 1910 or so. This is the picture of all the staff that are working on the distillery. You can see one woman here. She was probably It would have worked in the office at the time. She wouldn't have been working in production. But you can see the various men, the malt man, the distiller, and the guy that, if you can see my cursor with the mustache, he was the manager, Rob McNichol. He was a manager there for several years. There's another picture of him in 1914. Here he is again. You can see about 20 people would have worked at the distillery. You have the people with the shovels, the maltmen, brewers. You would have had the whole operation would have been going on at the distillery. Now this is 1914, and if you see his picture here, I'm going to fast forward to this picture. I'm sure if you're Longmorn fans, you know who this is, Masataka Takasura. He visited Longmorn in 1919. He spent a week working at all aspects of production. And there's a picture of him with Rob McNichol, the distillery manager. He learned a lot. He asked very detailed questions. Some of his questions are quite unique because he asked his distillery manager what makes the whiskey so special, and he said it was the water. And then he asked him, was it ever tested? He goes, no, we've never tested it. So he lots of detailed questions, and he, as you know the story, he went back and basically was the father of the Japanese whiskey industry. Now, the reason I'm showing you the picture on the right, this is Mr. Koichi Tsuruoka. Now, he's the Japanese ambassador to the UK, and Masataka has a great following in Japan. There's a TV series about him. He had married a lady from Kirkintilloch, and he's a very popular figure in Japan. And the ambassador has taken two groups to Longmorn Distillery because they're basically, what he was saying, he wanted to walk in the footsteps of the master, walk in the footsteps of Takasura. He was very emotional coming to the distillery. And if you see the picture on the left, you see that pipe on the left beside Masataka, his right shoulder, that's the same pipe at the distillery. That's the same door, probably been modernized. And so he stood at the exact same locations that Masataka stood at the distillery, and we have a couple of pictures, and that's Alan Winchester on the right with him that day. So a very keen follower. I mean, he's taken Japanese airline officials, he's taken politicians, he's been there a couple of times, and he's a very keen follower of Masataka, so he was very delighted that we could host him at the distillery. Just a few dates, you may know about some of this, but the rail siding, whiskey and barley, and so would have gone back and forth by rail line, but it closed at Longmorn in 1968. But they continued with this puggy, as you see in the top right-hand corner, that carried supplies back and forth between Benriach and Longmorn Distillery. Also, Duff also built Benriach Distillery just a few years after he built Longmorn Distillery, so it was another distillery that he built. 1970, the floor maltings closed, and that's when the company started to amalgamate. This went with Glenlivet and Glengrant Distillers and Hill Thompson to form Glenlivet Distilleries Limited, and they went under expansion almost immediately, going to 8 stills by 1974. Now, Hill Thompson had used Longmorn a lot in their blends. A couple of their blends, such as Queen Anne, we still make, and Something Special. They had used Longmorn for quite a while in their blends as well. So it was a very popular whiskey for blending. And then 2001, Pernod Ricard, when they bought Chivas Brothers from Seagram, and Seagram had bought Glenlivet in 1978. So that's how we came across our owning Longmorn Distillery today. These are an ad. You see in the very left here, it's an ad from 1902. Talks about Longmorn Glenlivet Distilleries. Distillers of pure Highland whiskey made solely from the finest malt, and it was an agent down at Edinburgh. So we know that very quickly it was also sold as for blending, but it was also sold the whiskey as single malt. The bottle here says bonded in 1939. That's the oldest bottle I have in the archive. I have a picture of one from the 1930s, but this one here it says bonded March 1939. So I don't know what year. There's no age on it, so we don't know how old it is, but it was actually given the year that it was bonded. You'll see the ones with the Highland malt with the white labels. These are from the 1960s. You'll see there was a 5-year-old, and that was by Hill Thompson. That was the company that was still doing it at the time. And a 10-year-old from the 1960s. If you're Longmorn collectors, you probably know that Gordon and MacPhail still use this label. They're very, very close to this label. You'll see if you're Gordon and MacPhail, they use matter of fact, but the only difference is you have Gordon and MacPhail at the bottom of the label as opposed to Hill Thompson. So they still use that label. It was a very popular whiskey in the 1960s. This is the Rain 1970s.
Yeah.
This dumpy one on the left, 75 centiliter. It was mostly for the French market. But the production, and Trevor can probably jump in later, the production at Longmorn would have been 99%, if not more, going into blended whiskeys. There was a very small malt market at that time. This one was produced pretty specifically for France in the 1970s. And then we start to see Longmorn come out as a single malt, a little more widely known in the 1980s. This is a 15-year-old. It's still available. You can still get it on auction. I've seen it several times. Then there's the 15-year-old that came out in 1994 that some of you have, I think, in front of you, which is a lovely dram. And it was changed to the 16-year-old that some of you have there tonight in 2007 to the first 16-year-old. So it went from 15-year-old in the 80s, 15-year-old in the 90s, and went to 16-year-old in 2007, which we still have. This is the 3 recent ones. This is this Distiller's Choice, which I find an excellent dram. I find this very smooth and easy to drink. I did an event down in Kirkintilloch for Massataca. It was a whiskey fair, and there are several different whiskey booths there, and I had a presentation with some photographs and so on from the distillery. And without a doubt, everybody that came up to me, this is what I had as a dram of choice. They're getting a dram. They said it was one of the best drams that they had at the event. I find that a very easy drinking, a lovely, accessible, lovely malt. And so did everybody, I think, agreed with me. The 16-year-old, that's a new 16, though it's packaging. And some of you are lucky enough to have the 23 in front of you. I haven't tried that one yet, but I hope some of you do. And then we also have another 3 that come out. Some of you may have had them already. We have a Secret Speyside collection, which is a selection of older whiskies from 4 of our distilleries, Caperdonic, Longmorn, Glenkeith, and Brausseau Glenlivet. And what we have in the series for Longmorn is an 18-year-old, a 23-year-old, and a 25-year-old. I'm not sure if anybody has tried those. Anyway, there's a few pictures. I think you've been there. So there's a spirit safe, the stills, and the warehouse. And I think one of the notes I found when I was putting this together is, I think Trevor alluded to it. It was Speyside's best kept secret, prized by blenders and savored by connoisseurs. So it's for people like yourselves that know the malt. I mean, it's an excellent single malt whiskey, but it's almost like it's a secret, Speyside's best kept secret, because as Trevor said, it's every distiller's second favorite dram after their own. So it's a very popular whiskey. It has a very consistent history to it. It's been operating ever since 1894, and as I said, we have records going right back to day one, which is really something from an archive point of view, to be able to have those records to prove the facts about when the distillery was established and the drawings of the distillery. So if you do get a chance to come to the archive, let me know. Hopefully we'll be back in business. I'd be glad to show them to you. They've all been preserved. Some of the original records, the drawings, the photographs, and I'd be glad to show them to you. And maybe we can find some spirit or something while we're in there.
New spirit.
New spirit, yes. Actually, I have tasted, and my first reaction, Trevor, was like leather bag, sort of letting leather off it for the new spirit. Very smooth, almost leathery, and it's very nice, lovely new spirit. And I think that's all I have, Alex.
Thank you, Chris. Listen, I hope you all appreciated that insight into our archives before you get the opportunity to at least come and visit. It's a great project. Chris and I are hugely passionate about it. And, the one question I had of you, Chris, have you any duplicates of those historical bottles that we could open when everyone comes and sees us?
No.
Oh.
You never know. Actually, we do have some of the Gordon MacPhail ones.
Yeah.
It's lovely whiskey, though. Yeah.
Chris, can I ask you a question just before we? 2 questions. The first is there anything? I know we are still piecing together the history of our great Scottish whiskies. Is there anything within Longmorn that you think is missing, or anything that we need to know that you would still like to piece together from its history?
Well, I think we're always looking for information. We're finding, even though we have very complete records for Longmorn, there are still gaps. Even though we have the distilling records, still gaps in sort of the sales, where it went around the world, what companies were using it. So we're always looking for information, and also older bottles. That bottle I showed you from the 1930s, that was an agency bottle. There may have been some distillery bottlings before that. I don't know. So the oldest one I had, maybe people on the call might know, but the oldest one I had was from the late 1930s. And they were all done by agencies. And it wasn't until 1960s that we started producing basically our own single malt.
And a question from Carol. Oh, nice. Is that for sale?
No, it's not for sale.
Which one's that?
You missed this bottle.
Just a general question.
Oh yes, yeah.
The bottles I showed you, that's pretty well the complete. There, you know, from distillery bottlings, there isn't a lot. There's ones from the 60s, 70s, 80s. There wasn't a lot of different expressions, but there's been a lot of. I can see some of the bottles in the screen. There's some obviously some private bottlings. Is that the 25-year-old?
Yes.
Yeah,
You
it's
miss
lovely.
it.
I have it on my screen. I didn't show you that one,
Okay.
but I have some cast strengths as well. Several of the distillers cast
Do
strength
you know this
editions.
bottle?
Just slide it along. There we go.
Hill and Thompson.
Yeah, right.
1930s. Yes.
Yes, that's one of the who bottled it?
Hill
Hill
Thompson.
and Thompson.
Yeah, that's an early one. What's the date on it?
There's no date. It's 32 years old.
Yeah, you can bring that
And
one
the
with you.
date is, I think, the 1930s.
I'll
Yes,
trade you
okay.
something. I'll trade you
Promise.
something very nice
Yes.
when you come.
Yes, okay.
That's a lovely bottle. Thanks. Show
So
me
Chris,
that.
just another question for you before we go to Trevor again. A question from Carol, and that is it true that Masataka modelled the stills at Nika on those he saw at Longmorn?
Yes, that's what I understand. That he used that shape and style of Longmorn stills when he started producing whiskey back in Japan. Yeah, I've heard that as well. I think it's actually in the book where he mentions that, where he used that original, as Trevor mentioned, sort of those big round soft design shoulders on it. And yeah, he did. Apparently, he's supposed to have used that design.
Mhm.
So Trevor, 100 years after Masataka was at the distillery and asked the distillery manager what makes Longmorn special, I'm going to pose exactly the same question to you.
Well, I would have to say the manager, Mark Cruikshank, because if I didn't say that, I'll get a bollocking for him in the morning. So.
I like it.
You know, as I said before, the broad, smooth shoulder stills makes it special as well. It gives it the character of the new spirit. But one of the things we have to remember in the 1890s was a big boom in whiskey at that time. And the amount of distilleries that would have been opened in the 1890s that are now closed down would be phenomenal. And for Longmorn to keep on going all these years, from 1894 to now, okay, it may be closed down in the 1900s for a while, but for it to keep on going is phenomenal. And the spirit that keeps on producing time after time after time, the quality is just amazing. It really is. But the malt that was sourced as well is all local. The malt that we're getting from at the moment at the Longmorn is from Murrayshire. The yeast again is we're using Lallemand yeast, or sometimes use Kerry yeast. We can vary the strains of yeast, but this doesn't have that much effect on the flavour because it gives it that fruity character, the Lallemand and the Kerry yeast. The mash tun, as I mentioned earlier, the Briggs mash tun, great piece of kit. We can put through a 9-ton mash at Longmorn in approximately 5 hours. It's an hour quicker than what it used to be before. But this allowed us to increase production from 3.5 molar to about 4.5 molar 5 years ago. But the consistency of the spirit just remained the same. The water supply from the Burnside wells is phenomenal supply as well. Never runs dry. You've got the Murray Aquifer underneath Longmorn that we use for cooling water. We've got borehole water there as well. Abundance of water as well, Alex.
That's a great insight to the stand. Did that expansion into the washbacks and so on present you any particular challenges? Was it just consistency was key?
Consistency is the main thing, but what we do is we separate spirit. We put it into the same casks, and our master blender, Sandy Hislop, is in charge of all this. Great lad, great knowledge. I mean, he'll tell you exactly if it's exactly the same quality a new spirit as you had before. And in a very short period of time, we got that quality just exactly the same again. To bear in mind that the only change was there was additional fermentation put in, and the mash tun changed to a Briggs mash tun, full outer mash tun Briggs. So other than that, the still shape remained the same. That's the biggest important thing, I think, within Longmorn Distillery.
Yeah, we do have the drawings, Trevor, the very original still. All
Yeah.
the dimensions. Yeah, it's amazing.
It is exactly the same. And you go, some of Chris's photographs goes back there to about 20 guys working at a distillery, 3 folk in the office. I wish it was still the same as that. We've got 3 folk in the office. I wouldn't have so much work to do. So, but now there's 5 guys. People always say, how much people work at Longmorn Distillery? I normally say about half of them. But there's 5 guys work at Longmorn, working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, producing that same spirit. It used to be a manually operated site. Majority of distilleries now have all went to automation, and this again assists in the quality, the spirit, and the consistency of the new spirit as well.
I always thought there was an opportunity at Longmorn because the receivers are all individual, aren't they? You could actually create an individual bottle from one receiver, Trevor. You need to speak to our colleagues about that, no?
Yes, you could actually do that. I mean, you could have a different strain of yeast or a different strain of malted barley, but you would still need the same quality of the final spirit, Alex, at the end of the day. Yeah.
So, listen, we've heard that it's reliable. You know, we've heard that from the Glenlivet Master Distiller, from you, from our custodian Master Blender, our director of blending. Does it present you any challenges?
It can do. It can do. When you do have, it's very, very rarely, if you have a variation, slight variation of the quality in the new spirit, it's very easy to detect in a distilling process where you can get the off notes from. If you get a serial note, it could be a burst condenser, it could be a burst steam coil, you're getting steam into your spirit still. It's very easy to detect. And we've got as much traceability in place now at distilleries. It's easy to trace when there's a dip in quality.
Trevor, can I just ask about, before I move on to Longmorn specific questions, about who's inspired you in the industry and what the best piece of advice you've had in being the distiller and now 17 distilleries and now the master distiller at Longmorn?
Who's inspired me? Well, right back in the day with Frank Massey, who's my original manager at Ardmore and Glendronach Distillery. And he says, oh, you should just go to the top, Malone. He says, you should just go to the top. And it took a while, but I'm still right at the top, but I would never, it's this industry is, as I said before, every day is a school day in industry. It's absolutely tremendous. And recently, one person that has inspired me is Master Distiller at Glenlivet, Alan Winchester. He was my line manager since 2005, since we got taken over by, I was Allied Distillers, we got taken over by Chivas Brothers. And the knowledge that Alan Winchester has of not only of the industry just now, but the past, is just, it's second to none. And he's an inspiration for, I would say, a lot of people within the whisky industry.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of questions here. I'll do my best to work our way through them and answer them. Keep the questions coming for Trevor too. Anything, Graham, the $1 million question we keep asking ourselves, thank you for this, that will there be a time when Longmorn is open to visitors? We'll always open our doors to the right visitors. Listen, it has been looked at. It's been looked at many times, whether you can use the railway building, whether you can use the manager's office. Clearly, the Chivas Brothers' focus on Speyside is Strathyla, Aberlour and the Glenlivet. But it's certainly something that has been looked at recently. Because if you look at Longmorn, and to look at another question further down, we look at the expansion into the 18, the 23 and the distillers. Look at Chivas Regal Altus, which is Longmorn as part of it. Longmorn is also part of every bottle of Chivas Regal. Secret Speyside was launched just 12 months ago, and we have a Longmorn 18, a Longmorn 23, and a Longmorn 25 now out there. So Longmorn's absolutely boomed in recent years, and there's a real desire. I deal with all requests to come to our distilleries, and there's certainly enough desire there for people to go to Longmorn Distillery. But at the moment, it's by request, and it's during the Spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival. Is that right, Trevor? You've shown a lot of guests round too.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head there with the Speyside Whisky Festival. It goes on, there's maybe 2 tours at 16, 32 people, it's on the website, bang, it's gone like that. So it tells you how popular it is. But it's got the mystique as well. If you don't take visitors round, people wonder what like it is. You guys, a lot of you guys will have been at the Longmorn Distillery and know how it is, but it's got that mystique as well, and it's like a jewel in the crown, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tom and Graham, a couple of questions related to that of where Longmorn's headed. I'm not sure what's next due to a period. You'll have seen a rapid growth in Longmorn recently. So first with the distillers, the 16 and the 23 coming into the collection. So almost a relaunch of Longmorn itself, offering more expressions. And then, of course, Altus. I don't know how many of you have tried Altus, but it's incredible with Brave Owl, Longmorn, Altavania, Strathisle and Tormore. 5 single malts blended together, and Longmorn's key to that. Secret Speyside, going to travel retail, going to our airports first, and now it'll be launched globally in other countries. So there's been a rapid period, and of course we have it as part of our Distillery Reserve collection that we released too in Speyside. So who knows what's next is the question. He said, avoiding it. You know, and of course it's a huge part of Chivas 18 and Chivas Regal. I remember we used to actually do a tasting for Chivas 18 many years ago, and you got to taste Longmorn 18, and a chocolatier developed a chocolate with it, and it was violet flavoured. It was absolutely beautiful. It was a great tasting. And Graham, how much of the distillate goes to blended or single malt whisky? I think fair to say still predominantly to give that final sheen to Chivas Regal specifically, and now Altus. Is that fair, Trevor?
Yeah, I agree with that, Alex. And I think because of the different ranges, we want to give consumers what they want. They might not want the 16-year-old, they might not want the distiller's choice, they might not want the 23. 23-year-old's obviously high end. But I mean, we want to give the consumers a variation of Longmorn to see what they like. I think that's a big thing in every single malt distillery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And Graham, you're right. We were all incredibly disappointed when Spirit of Speyside 2020 was cancelled, but hopefully we'll see you all back there next year, if not before. I certainly know that the distilleries are now preparing to reopen on Speyside from the 15th of July, which is very good news. Any further questions of Trevor that you'd like to ask direct or on the Longmorn range before we wrap up? Tom, would you tell us a bit about your group? It'd be great to hear more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Well, I think Chris and I have spoken before, last year and the year before. Chris, nice to actually finally see you as well, Chris. I actually, in my day job, I work for the Royal Institute of British Architects, and I perhaps slightly audaciously applied for one of their research grants a couple of years ago, which was bringing together my background in architecture and in whisky to write a report about the architecture of the Scotch whisky industry. They gave me the amount of money I was asking for. So then Chris very kindly had supplied me with a lot of the drawings and the photographs that we've seen tonight, and ultimately helped me write a report that I was really happy with. So thanks very much for that, Chris.
No, you're welcome. I'm glad that helped you.
Yeah, you really did. Thank you.
They weren't the original, so don't worry.
They came out nice though. So
yeah.
But then I mean, Longmorn was one of the whiskies I think very first I tried many years ago. Kind of forgot about it for a long time, and then obviously, like everyone else here, probably a member of various other groups, Malt Maniacs and so forth. And I thought, no one seems to have set up a Longmorn group. You know, we all know here as real avid whiskey fans that Longmorn is the connoisseur's choice, so to speak. So I set the group up, and I think as of this evening, I've invited quite a few people, but I think we're on about 600 people nearly now. So clearly there's people out there who sort of feel the same way. And I guess, I just pulled it all together and delighted that, yourself and Sandy and Trevor and so forth have been supportive in coming out with all of your knowledge and experience that you've gained. So really, really grateful for all of your work. And I must just say, lastly as well, if anybody's not tuned into Scotch Watch, Alex is a fine compere, as you've seen. And I don't miss one every week. We're on number 4, aren't we, Alex? So
Yep.
Looking forward to the next one.
Oh, thank you, Tom. And tomorrow we've got Trevor's colleague, Graham Cruikshank from Aberlour on Scotch Watch. So, well, listen, that's great to hear. And thank you for your passion for Longmorn. You know, I think, you know, we see it, you know, last year we launched the Secret Speyside collection in London, and certainly Longmorn was the real star of the show, just admitting more people. You know, we see it elsewhere, the passion people have. It's great when people come together with real passion for it. So we really, really appreciate it, Tom, and really appreciate all of you. What I would say is please keep in touch with us. You know, Graham, you said you'd love to visit the archive. There's an open invite for everyone to visit the archive. You are more than welcome as a group if you come to Shafila. We'll make sure you get to meet Trevor in person. You know, 4 decades in the business, but he's truly one of the finest distillers in the business, and great footballer as well, actually, Trevor. You never mentioned that tonight.
We won't go down the San Sebastian route, Alex. That's for when we meet him in person, not for online.
That's true, not recording. So, Trevor, I wonder if I'd like to hand over to you just for a couple of final words, just to say what Longmorn means to you and thank our guests too.
As I said, it's a pleasure being the master distiller of Longmorn Distillery. But to be honest, you are the guys that make it a passion. Every whiskey lover makes it a passion. That makes it easy for us. We really don't have anything to do. We just make a whiskey. Yeah, it's quite simple. We only need the 3 products. We only need the barley, yeast, and water. It's so simple. It's so simple. But it's the passion that you guys show. In all these groups, and especially, I would say, during this last 3 months, we've seen so much online whiskey chats and what have you, and the passion shown by yourselves and others is just, it's second to none, and it does make our job a lot easier, I must admit. And thank you very much for tuning in tonight, guys, and Slàinte mhath. Cheers.
Yeah, Slàinte. Cheers, everyone. Slàinte.
Slàinte.
Yeah. You know, I always love how humble distillers are. 33 years, 17 distilleries, and it's simple. It's just 3 simple ingredients. It's amazing, and I think that's the beauty. Trevor, thank you for your time tonight, because I know you've got the not so considerable cast of keeping our distilleries running at the moment. So thank you, and listen, thank you to all of you. Please keep in touch with Chris. Chris, thank you for joining us too from the archive. Chris, a final word from you, Pat? Yeah, looking forward to getting back.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back in the archive. I really love what I do. I mean, it's when you come into the archive and see some of the documents and the history that we have to our distilleries, I just find it quite amazing. So I'm looking forward to getting back to work. And as Alex said, when you get over, just give me some advance notice. Make sure I know you're coming, and I'll take you in and give you a personal tour of the archive so you can see a lot of these artifacts. Because as Trevor said, it's you folks that keep us employed, I guess. Thanks very much.
I love it. And Dom, I'm going to finish with a question from Dom that ends the evening brilliantly. And of course, Dom will have heard us say that Longmorn's every distiller's manager's second favourite dram. You are the distiller, Trevor. What's your second favourite dram? I love it.
It has to be the 18-year-old Glenlivet.
Need to say no more.
Say no more. And the last word, I'd just like to thank Alex for hosting this tonight. Alex done a great job over this last 3 months, hosting all these things, and his banter is amazing, as I've found out to my peril a lot of times. And we've had a great times together, Alex, and thanks for hosting this tonight. Cheers.
Yeah, no worries, and thank you to all of you. Keep in touch. I have recorded this, Tom, so I'll get the copy of the recording to you. You can edit out the bits that we'll do that first. But listen, thanks everyone. Slàinte mhath. Have a brilliant weekend when it comes, and stay in touch.
Cheers.
Thank you all very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye bye.